Hi, I'm Davina. At my award ceremony, the biggest night of my life, my parents didn't show up. They just left a note on the kitchen counter. Just a trophy. That night, something inside me broke. But what followed shattered so much more. Secrets, betrayals, a lifetime of sacrifices nobody ever asked for, but always expected. What happens when the daughter they took for granted finally walks away and cancels everything they counted on? You think the note was bad? Trust me, it was just the beginning. The door creaked open into a house that felt colder than the night outside. I stepped in, the polished wooden floor muffling my steps. The award plaque felt heavier in my hand with every breath I took. Faint traces of spring clung to the air, cut grass, damp earth. But inside, it was just silence. No balloons, no cheers, not even a half-hearted good job echoing from upstairs. I shut the door softly behind me and paused, listening for any hint of life. Nothing. The house, so familiar, suddenly felt foreign. I walked into the kitchen, where the counter was cluttered with yesterday's mail and an empty cereal bowl, abandoned like an afterthought. That's when I saw it. A crumpled scrap of paper lying in the center of the counter, weighed down by a half-empty salt shaker. I moved closer, my heart thrumming in my chest for reasons I couldn't name yet. Scrawled across it in quick, lazy handwriting were 3 words: just a trophy. I froze. For a full minute, maybe longer, I stood there, staring at it like it might change if I blinked hard enough. The plaque, still clutched in my hand, pressed against my ribs. I didn't even realize I was holding my breath until the edges of my vision tightened. No decorations, no card, no, "We're proud of you." Just that note. 3 words that gutted me deeper than 1,000 insults ever could. I set the plaque down carefully on the counter next to the note. It made a small, hollow sound against the laminate, a sound that seemed too loud in the heavy silence. I straightened, looking around as if expecting someone to jump out and yell, "Surprise!" But there was only the steady tick of the kitchen clock, indifferent to the small disaster it was witnessing. Maybe they forgot. Maybe something happened. An emergency? Maybe. I knew better. I had always known better. For a moment, I tried to conjure a reason, any reason, why my own family wouldn't be here to celebrate one of the biggest achievements of my life. I thought about when I won the regional spelling bee in middle school, how they left a note taped to the fridge. Dinner in the oven. No, congratulations. No, we're proud of you. I thought about my high school art exhibit. The way Mom said, maybe next time they'll pick a real artist, when I showed her the invitation. I thought about the scholarships, the internships, the nights I stayed up crying into my pillow because I had nobody to share my victories with. Not really. They always made sure I knew. My accomplishments were inconvenient, my successes invisible, unless they could brag about them to their friends. Tonight wasn't new. It was just the first time I couldn't lie to myself about it anymore. My phone buzzed against my hip, breaking my spiral of thought. I pulled it out, the screen lighting up with a notification from my university. Congratulations to all our graduates and award recipients. Celebrate this important milestone with the people who love and support you. I laughed, a hollow, humorless sound that scraped my throat raw. It sounded so ridiculous, so naive. The people who love and support you. I didn't even bother opening the email fully. I locked the screen and shoved the phone back into my pocket, feeling the weight of it like another anchor dragging me down. I grabbed a glass from the cabinet and filled it with water, my hands shaking just enough to slosh a little over the rim. I drank it down quickly, trying to wash away the bitter taste crawling up my throat. The kitchen clock ticked on, oblivious. I turned off the light and made my way down the hallway to my bedroom, the award plaque still tucked awkwardly under my arm. The house was dim, bathed in the fading lavender light of early evening. Every step I took felt heavier, more permanent, like I was walking away from something I couldn't name yet. I paused at my bedroom door, glancing back one last time. The living room sat dark and empty. The kitchen counter gleamed under the faint light from the street lamp outside, casting a ghostly glow over the crumpled note. Just a trophy. The words echoed in my head as I pushed open my door and stepped inside. I set the plaque down on my desk carefully, almost reverently, like it deserved the respect nobody else had bothered to give it. My fingers lingered on the smooth wood of the frame. I sat down heavily on the edge of my bed, the mattress sighing under my weight. I stared at the plaque for a long time, trying to find meaning where there was none. The ache in my chest wasn't sharp, it was slow, corrosive, a steady unraveling of something I hadn't even realized was still holding me together. I used to believe family would notice eventually, I whispered to the empty room. That night, something inside me cracked wide open. The night stretched on, heavy and unyielding. I lay back on my bed, the ceiling above me fading into shadow. For a long moment, I just stared, letting the silence settle into my bones. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked once. Then the world went still again. The award plaque sat untouched on my desk, its presence almost accusing. I closed my eyes, but the weight in my chest didn't lift. Instead, another memory crept in. One I hadn't invited, but one that came anyway, the way old wounds always do when you're already bleeding. A week ago, the backyard had pulsed with life, music thudding against the walls like a heartbeat I wasn't allowed to join. I remembered lying in bed, the bass so loud it rattled the glass of my window. The lights strung from the trees outside had cast glowing webs across the lawn. Wesley's party. It wasn't just any party, it was a spectacle. Food trucks lined the curb, their neon signs flashing like beacons. A DJ spun tracks from a booth set up on the patio. A drone buzzed overhead, capturing every smiling face, every drunken cheer. People I didn't even recognize streamed in and out of our house, laughing, hugging, congratulating. Through the sheer curtains of my bedroom window, I watched Mom, Dorothy, flutter around like a hostess at a celebrity gala, a tray of custom cupcakes balanced expertly in her manicured hands. Each cupcake was topped with a miniature fondant version of Wesley's face, complete with his cocky smirk. Dad manned the grill like it was the 4th of July, flipping burgers and ribs with theatrical flair, laughing too loudly at jokes that weren't that funny. Guests toasted Wesley, patted him on the back, snapped selfies with him as if being near him would somehow transfer his good fortune onto them. And me? I wasn't invited. I wasn't even acknowledged. I sat at my desk, pretending to work, pretending not to hear the music, the laughter, the clinking of glasses, pretending it didn't matter. It wasn't the first time. Growing up, Wesley was the sun, and I was just a planet forced to orbit him, unnoticed. Every birthday of his was an event, a blowout party, banners hung across the living room, gifts piled high. For mine, if they remembered, it was a leftover cake from the grocery store and a distracted, happy birthday over breakfast. When Wesley barely passed his finals in high school, there was a dinner out, complete with a custom-made cake shaped like a graduation cap. When I graduated summa cum laude from university, Mom said, "That's nice, honey," without even looking up from her phone. As a child, I learned quickly that asking for attention was a sin. If I asked for help with homework, I was being difficult. If I asked for space to paint, to write, to breathe, I was starting drama. Wesley always needed the room to revolve around him, and it always did. The more I tried to matter, the more invisible I became. Lying there in the dark, the echoes of Wesley's party still vivid in my mind, I felt the old hurt twisting itself tighter around my ribs. They had celebrated him like he won the Nobel Prize. They left me a crumpled note and an empty house. Earlier today, if I could even call it that, it already felt like a lifetime ago. I'd found the courage to ask Mom, standing there in the kitchen after my ceremony, clutching my plaque like a lifeline. "Did no one want to do anything for me?" I'd asked, voice carefully neutral, like I wasn't begging for something as simple as being seen. She hadn't even looked up from sorting the mail. Without missing a beat, Dorothy said, "You're not really the celebrating type, are you?" As if that was a compliment. As if her indifference was an act of mercy. I remembered standing there feeling like an idiot, feeling like a child again, foolish for needing anything at all. Her words stung not because they were sharp, but because they were so thoughtless, so casual, like my existence didn't warrant more than a shrug. I turned onto my side, the bedsheets cool against my skin. The plaque on the desk gleamed dully in the faint light spilling in from the street lamp outside. I should have known. I did know. But there's a difference between knowing something in your head and feeling it crack open in your chest. I thought about every time I had clapped for Wesley, cheered for his games, celebrated his smallest victories even when he didn't notice. I thought about all the times I sat quietly with my own wins, waiting for someone to care, and when no one did, telling myself it didn't matter. But it did. It always did. The clock on my nightstand blinked 1:17 a.m. in cold blue digits. I pulled the blanket tighter around myself, even though it wasn't cold. Sleep wouldn't come. It never did when the ache got this loud. For a long time I lay there, staring at the faint outline of the ceiling, my mind racing through years of neglect disguised as giving me space. And in that restless silence, something inside me hardened. They were never going to celebrate me. They were never going to see me. Not really. Because to them, I was never the reason to celebrate. I was the background noise, the shadow that made Wesley shine brighter. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing the tears not to fall. I was done crying for people who never cried for me. That was the night I decided silence wasn't grace. It was erasure. And I was done being erased. The clock blinked 2:04 a.m. when I finally sat up. My room smelled faintly of lavender from the candle I never lit, a mockery of calm. I pressed my bare feet onto the cool floor and let my hands rest in my lap for a moment, breathing in the weight of everything I could no longer carry. No one was coming to fix it. No apology would be offered. And I was done waiting for one. I moved quietly, careful not to make noise, even though there was no one awake to hear me. The duffel bag I used back when I moved into the dorm sat folded under my bed, a little dusty but serviceable. I pulled it out, shaking it open. The zipper let out a low scrape that sounded too loud in the stillness. I packed methodically. My laptop, charger, and the degree I fought for without a single congratulatory handshake from my parents. The envelope of cash I'd saved from tutoring sessions and late-night shifts at the campus library. Jeans, 2 sweaters, the comfortable sneakers I bought last Black Friday, while everyone else splurged on flat-screen TVs. I left behind anything that felt like a chain. Yearbooks, gifts I never asked for but received anyway, like someone had picked up whatever was nearest to the checkout line. No notes, no farewell, just movement. Downstairs, the house was bathed in dim shadows. I stood at the threshold of the living room for a moment, scanning the furniture, the family photos that lined the mantel. None of them featured me alone. I was background noise there too, wedged into the corners, an afterthought. I adjusted the strap on my shoulder and turned the doorknob slowly, the latch giving way with a reluctant click. Stepping outside, the crisp air wrapped around me like a second skin. A few stars winked through the thinning clouds. The driveway stretched before me, and beyond it, a different life. I paused, one hand resting lightly on the frame of the door. No one stirred upstairs. No silhouettes at the windows. No calls trailing after me, asking where I was going. They wouldn't even know I'd left until morning, if they noticed at all. I closed the door without a sound. The 30-minute drive to the motel felt both impossibly long and brutally short. The roads were mostly empty, the occasional truck humming by in the opposite lane. The radio played low, a classic rock station half lost to static, but I didn't turn it off. It was better than sitting alone with the buzz of my own heartbeat. The motel was one of those places you blink and miss on the highway, a squat one-story building with peeling paint and a neon vacancy sign that flickered weakly against the night. Inside, the clerk barely looked up from his newspaper as I slid my ID across the counter. He handed me a key, an actual metal key, not a plastic card, and mumbled something about free coffee in the morning. I nodded, tucking the key into my jacket pocket. The room was nothing special. Bed, dresser, tiny bathroom. Faded wallpaper peeled slightly at the corners. But when I stepped inside and turned the lock behind me, I realized something I hadn't felt in years. Relief. No invisible expectations hanging in the air, no tightrope to walk between being too much and never enough. Just 4 walls, a sagging mattress, and a silence that didn't judge me. I dropped the duffel bag on the bed and sat down beside it. My body ached in ways I hadn't noticed before, from holding it all together, from carrying so much alone. Pulling out my laptop, I flipped it open and created a new document. At the top, I typed the title without hesitation, "Everything They Don't Know I Paid For." And then the list began. Wesley's laptop when he spilled soda on it 2 years ago and never told anyone. Dad's overdue Visa bill I paid off in secret so he wouldn't lose his credit line. The water bill Mom forgot about during that rough winter when we almost had the pipes freeze. My own textbooks, my own gas money, the groceries that mysteriously refilled the pantry when someone must have remembered to shop. Line after line poured out of me. Every silent bailout, every invisible act of love they never noticed, or worse, never thought to ask where it came from. I stared at the screen, my jaw tight. It wasn't just the money. It was the emotional math I had been doing for years, calculating what parts of myself to suppress just to keep the peace. And for what? Not a party, not even a hug. Just a note on the counter and a shrug that told me all I needed to know. My hands hovered over the keyboard as a new thought began to crystallize, sharper than any sadness. This wasn't about getting even. It wasn't about making them hurt the way I had been hurt. It was about making sure the weight they so casually placed on my shoulders stayed off for good. Because I was done. Done carrying them, done patching up holes they refused to see, done sacrificing my sanity for scraps of affection. I closed the laptop softly, like tucking in a child. 3 days, I thought. 3 days, and everything they leaned on would vanish. Not because I wanted revenge, but because survival sometimes looks like not catching a falling knife. Morning seeped into the motel room through the thin curtains, painting the faded carpet in stripes of dull light. I hadn't slept much, but I didn't feel tired. It was a different kind of energy humming under my skin, focused, deliberate, the kind you find when you finally realize no one's coming to save you. Sitting at the small wooden desk by the window, I powered up my laptop. It took a few seconds for the screen to flicker to life, but once it did, I wasted no time. My fingers moved with a calmness that felt foreign at first, then natural. One by one, I logged into every account that tethered me to that house. First, the family phone plan. I scrolled down, clicked Manage Lines, and deactivated each one except mine. A warning popped up. Are you sure you want to remove these users? They will lose service immediately. I clicked yes without hesitation. Next, the streaming services. Spotify tied to Wesley's email, Netflix still billed to my card, even the cloud storage account my parents dumped every blurry family photo into. One by one, cancel, cancel, cancel. Then the utilities. I opened the water company portal, the electric company, the garbage disposal service, all still under my name, because at some point it had been easier for me to manage it than to listen to them complain. One click at a time, I dismantled the invisible safety net they never even knew existed. With every confirmation email that pinged into my inbox, a small knot in my chest loosened. Not because I wanted them to suffer, but because for the first time, I wasn't going to suffer for them. I closed the laptop and leaned back in the stiff motel chair, staring at the ceiling as if the answers were written there. It was still early, the muggy June air already making the small room feel stuffy. I opened the window slightly, letting in a weak breeze that smelled faintly of asphalt and cut grass. And then, the phone started buzzing. At first, it was just one notification, then another and another. Wesley, bro WTF, where's my Spotify? Wesley again, my phone's dead, man, I need it for work. Mom, Dorothy, sent a longer message. Why is my stylist saying payment failed? Davina, call me now. Another one from Dad. The lights are acting weird. Did you forget to pay again? I watched the messages roll in, a steady stream of panic disguised as accusations. The chaos I'd carried silently for years was now crashing down around them, and they were scrambling, desperate to find the net that had always caught them before they even realized they were falling. But this time, there was no net. Not anymore. Dorothy sent another message, this one laced with a guilt so thick it nearly made me laugh. You're hurting everyone. You always take things so personally. This isn't what family does to each other. It was almost impressive how quickly they shifted from confusion to blame. Not once did anyone ask if I was okay. Not once did anyone say, we're sorry. Instead, It was my fault. For removing support they never thanked me for. It was my fault for letting them feel even a fraction of the insecurity I'd lived with every day. I put the phone down on the desk, letting it buzz unanswered. The next barrage came faster. Wesley, sending nothing but angry emojis. Dad, firing off messages like bullets. Unbelievable, ungrateful. You'll regret this when we're gone. And Dorothy, the master of emotional manipulation, trying every key on the broken piano of our relationship. I didn't mean what I said. You know we love you deep down. You're being selfish after everything we've done for you. Selfish. That word echoed in my mind, bitter and absurd. If survival was selfish, then yes, I was finally guilty. I opened the family group chat just long enough to see the train wreck unfolding. Wesley. Where TF is Davina? Dad. She's punishing us. Typical. Dorothy. Don't engage, she wants attention. I laughed quietly, a sound more disbelief than amusement. They truly believed that cutting the leash they'd tied around my neck was about attention. They didn't see that I wasn't standing in the doorway waiting to be noticed anymore. I was already halfway down the road, and they were arguing with my shadow. Without another glance, I muted the group chat and blocked notifications from their numbers. No arguments, no explanations, no more wasted words on people who only listened when something was missing from their plates. Their chaos wasn't my responsibility anymore. Their hunger wasn't mine to feed. Their darkness wasn't mine to brighten. I glanced around the room again, the peeling wallpaper, the ancient TV perched on a particle board dresser, the thin curtains struggling to block out the rising sun. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't comfortable. But it was mine. As I powered down my phone for the night, I whispered into the stillness, more to myself than to anyone else. They're finally feeling the weight I've been carrying alone for years. And I was just getting started. The next morning, the air inside the motel room was thick, heavy with the kind of humidity that made the walls feel closer than they were. I swung my legs off the bed and rubbed the back of my neck, letting the reality settle into my bones. This was my life now, stripped down, raw, mine to rebuild. The laptop still sat on the nightstand, the screen dark. I reached for it, my fingers steady. There were no doubts clouding my mind anymore. No second guessing. I powered it on, and while it booted, I grabbed a bottle of water from the tiny motel fridge and took a sip, savoring the small luxury of doing something just for myself. When the email notification popped up, I saw it immediately, the subject line bold and almost shining through the gloom. Offer extended academic center manager position. My heart skipped once, twice, then thudded into a new rhythm. I clicked it open. It wasn't just an offer. It was a door, a real door. Full-time, benefits, a salary that wouldn't leave me scraping by, and my own office at the new center they were opening 2 towns over. They wanted me, not as a backup, not as a favor, not because it was convenient. They saw what I had built with my students, the quiet success I had nurtured in a place no one else cared to look. For a moment I just stared at the screen, letting the reality of it wash over me. I didn't have to explain myself. I didn't have to ask permission. All I had to do was say yes. I hit reply without a second thought. Thank you for the opportunity. I accept the offer with enthusiasm and look forward to contributing to the success of the new center. Click, send. The heaviness on my chest lifted just a fraction. Not enough to fly, but enough to breathe a little easier. By noon, I had packed up what little I had brought to the motel. I booked a short-term rental closer to the center, a modest 1-bedroom apartment with peeling linoleum floors and a tiny kitchen. It wasn't fancy, but it was a start. It was enough. I loaded my duffel bag into the back of a rideshare, exchanging polite small talk with the driver, while my mind spun plans like threads. Furniture to buy, utilities to set up, routes to memorize. Halfway to the new place, my phone buzzed. The number was unfamiliar, but local. I almost let it go to voicemail. Almost, but curiosity got the better of me. Hello? I answered cautiously. No voice answered back, just a click. And then a mechanical voice from the recording. You have received a certified letter. Please check your front desk reception. Confused, I furrowed my brow but thanked the recording anyway. Once I reached the rental office, the front desk clerk handed me a slightly crumpled envelope. No return address. Just my name scrawled in messy handwriting. Dorothy. Of course. Back in the new apartment, surrounded by bare walls and possibility, I sat cross-legged on the floor and opened it. The letter was a patchwork of contradictions. Half apology, half blame. Words like, "We didn't mean to hurt you. You've always been independent. You never needed much. We were under a lot of stress. It wasn't personal. Family is about forgiveness. No real ownership, no real regret. Just another attempt to twist the blade a little softer, to reframe the years of neglect as an accident instead of a choice." I let the letter drop to the floor. It didn't deserve to be framed, to be mourned. It was just another brick in the wall they had spent a lifetime building between us. I stood up slowly, letting the ache in my joints remind me how long I had sat still for them. No more. "You can't fix a house built on quicksand," I muttered under my breath, tossing the letter into the small motel trash can. They weren't sorry. They were scared. Scared of losing their scapegoat, their silent labor, their fallback plan. Scared that without me, the cracks in the foundation they ignored for decades would finally split open and swallow them whole. I checked my email again. The confirmation for my lease had arrived. Move-in day was tomorrow. Tonight would be my last night in the motel. Tonight, I closed a chapter they still hadn't realized was over. As the late afternoon sun dipped low, throwing golden streaks across the stained carpet, I packed my bag again, lighter this time, less burdened. Locking the motel door behind me, I slung my duffel over one shoulder and smiled to myself. "They thought they could guilt me back," I whispered. They were wrong. The heavy motel door shut behind me for the last time, and I didn't look back. The sun blazed overhead, pressing down like a dare. I squared my shoulders against it, against all of it, and moved forward, into my new life, into a new place where no one knew my name unless I chose to tell them. The apartment wasn't much. Cracked tile floors, beige walls screaming for a fresh coat of paint, and a faint smell of paint thinner that clung to the air. But it was clean. It was quiet. It was mine. I spent the afternoon unpacking what little I owned. A few worn books, my laptop, a secondhand coffee maker. Piece by piece, I was building a life that no longer required permission. It was almost evening when I plugged my laptop into the wall and logged into my backup email account. I wasn't sure what made me check it. Curiosity maybe, or a premonition. The inbox was flooded. At first I thought it was junk mail, but then I saw the subject lines. "Family is everything. Betrayal cuts deepest. You reap what you sow." I opened one post link hesitantly, and there it was. A public Facebook rant, courtesy of Dorothy. Vague enough not to name me, but sharp enough that anyone with half a brain would know exactly who she meant. "Some people forget where they come from," it read. "They think success means cutting ties with the people who sacrificed everything for them. Shameful." Underneath, comments bloomed like weeds. "Stay strong, Dorothy. She'll regret it one day." "Kids these days are so selfish." Extended family chimed in. Aunts, cousins, neighbors who once handed me Halloween candy and now turned their backs without a second thought. I clicked through more posts. Wesley, too, had taken to Instagram, posting blurry photos of our old backyard with captions like, "Family ain't disposable," and "Some people just ain't built right." The worst part wasn't their words. It was how quickly strangers, people who hadn't lifted a finger for me in years, lapped them up like gospel. I sat back in the creaky chair, the laptop humming quietly on my desk. My chest tightened, not with grief, but with a kind of cold fury I hadn't allowed myself to feel until now. They could paint whatever picture they wanted. It didn't make it real. I reached for my water bottle when another notification dinged. A new email, this time sent to my work address. My stomach dropped the second I saw the sender's name. Wesley. I opened it with slow, deliberate fingers. "You better fix this," the email said. "I know where you work." No punctuation, no pleasantries, just a threat, thinly veiled but crystal clear. For a moment, I couldn't move. Not because I was scared. Not exactly. Because I knew what this meant. They weren't just trying to guilt me back anymore. They were choosing war. Slowly, methodically, I forwarded the email to my supervisor, adding a simple note. "Potential security concern. Please advise. I didn't want drama. I didn't want attention. I just wanted to do my job, live my life, and be left alone. But if they were going to bring the fight to my doorstep, I wasn't about to stand there and let them. My supervisor, kind but firm, replied within minutes. We'll increase security measures immediately. Thank you for letting us know. I exhaled a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. I wasn't alone here. Not anymore. The next morning, the building manager installed a keypad lock on the staff entrance. Cameras were checked, policies were reviewed. It was subtle but solid, like laying bricks against an incoming storm. I stood by my office window, watching the parking lot shimmer under the summer heat, and realized I wasn't afraid. Not of Wesley, not of Dorothy, not of the lies they were weaving around me like spiderwebs. This wasn't family anymore. This was survival, and survival meant drawing lines, clear, hard, permanent. Inside my chest, something old and heavy cracked loose. Not sadness, not guilt, freedom. Next time they cross the line, I thought, staring at my reflection in the glass, there won't be another warning. I turned from the window, my office door clicking shut behind me. Let them come. I was ready. The sky had darkened to a heavy steel, the air thick and still, as if the world itself was holding its breath. I tossed my keys onto the small table by the door and kicked off my shoes, the tile cool against my bare feet. Thunder rumbled low in the distance, not quite here yet, but close enough that the windows rattled faintly in warning. I was just about to heat up leftovers when my phone buzzed violently against the counter. Unknown number. I stared at it for a second, every instinct screaming at me to ignore it. But a deeper instinct, the one honed by years of dealing with them, told me exactly who it was. I answered without a word. Finally, Wesley's voice snarled into my ear. Took you long enough to stop hiding. I said nothing, letting the silence stretch between us like a taut wire. You're a real piece of work, you know that? He spat. You think you're better than us now? You think you can just walk away like you never owed us anything? I leaned back against the kitchen counter, feeling the cool stone bite into my palms. I could almost see him, pacing, red-faced, wild-eyed, painting himself as the victim in a story he wrote himself. You ruined everything, he barked. Mom's a wreck because of you. You got people looking at us like we're trash. There it was. Not guilt, not regret, just embarrassment, just wounded pride. And then, faint but unmistakable, I heard it. Sobbing. Loud, theatrical, dragging on the edges of his words like background noise. Dorothy. I closed my eyes, letting the sound wash over me without sinking in. It wasn't real. It was a performance. An old, tired play I'd seen too many times before. Nobody said I'm sorry. Nobody said we hurt you. Just accusations, like knives tossed blindly into the dark. You done yet? I asked, my voice steady, almost bored. There was a pause, like he hadn't expected that. Like he was so used to me folding under the weight of their chaos that he didn't know what to do when I didn't. You're the selfish one, he hissed. You always have been. Everything we did for you. I let out a soft laugh. Not bitter, not cruel, just tired. No, I said quietly. You did everything for yourselves, and you used me to clean up the mess. His breath caught on the other end. Good. You didn't lose me, I continued, voice sharpening like the edge of a blade. You pushed me away. You chose yourselves every single time. And now you get to live with that. I took a deep breath, feeling the words settle into my bones like steel. No more money, I said. No more favors. No more pretending. He tried to interrupt. I heard the sputtering outrage, but I cut through it cleanly. And unless you can come to me with real apologies, not crocodile tears, not guilt trips, you get no access to me. None. The storm outside cracked open then, a flash of lightning illuminating my small kitchen for a split second. I didn't flinch, because for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of the thunder. I wasn't afraid of them. Wesley started shouting again, some mix of curse words and blame and rage. I didn't listen. I ended the call mid-sentence, my thumb steady as I blocked the number. Then I blocked Dorothy. Then every other number tied to that sinking ship I used to call family. It wasn't hate that fueled me. It was survival. It was choosing myself for once, fully, unapologetically. I set the phone down, the room vibrating faintly with the heavy roll of thunder outside. The rain hadn't come yet, but it would. You could feel it in the air, that thick electric pull. I leaned against the wall, arms folded, feeling more anchored than I had in years. They could cry, they could rage, they could smear my name to anyone who would listen, but they couldn't reach me anymore, because I wasn't standing still, waiting to be dragged back into their chaos. I was walking away, and for the first time, truly, they weren't coming with me. Another low rumble shook the windows, and I whispered into the growing storm, my voice steady and sure. The next time they reach out, it'll be too late. The days after the final call settled into a strange, thick calm. Not peaceful exactly, but suspended, like the air before a storm finally breaks. I woke up that morning to a gray, heavy sky pressing against my windows. Springfield's usual buzzing summer had been muted into a humid, suffocating quiet. Coffee in hand, I logged into my email, expecting the usual work updates. Instead, a series of forwarded legal documents blinked back at me. I clicked open the first one. Eviction notice, filed against the leaseholders of my childhood home, past due utilities, terminated service accounts, frozen credit lines. Everything that had once invisibly stayed afloat, because I made sure it did, was crumbling fast now. I stared at the screen, feeling a sharp, almost electric pang in my chest. Not regret, not even sorrow. Relief. The dominoes had started to fall the moment I stepped away, and now, finally, they were seeing just how much weight I'd been carrying for them all along. A soft knock at my door pulled me out of the moment. Just a package delivery. I signed without thinking, my mind still circling around the cascading collapse I wasn't lifting a single finger to stop. By noon, the thick humidity outside broke into a brief, ugly shower. Rain hammered the roof while I worked quietly, emails pinging into my inbox faster than I could read them. Utility companies, the county clerk's office, even the landlord's firm, all forwarding me notices about accounts they could no longer reach the primary holder for. They weren't my responsibility anymore. But because my name had once been tied to so many bills, they wanted me to see the wreckage. Message received. I poured another coffee and sat back, letting the documents pile up in unread tabs. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed with another unknown number. I knew it before I answered. Clifford. I pressed accept anyway, bracing myself. His voice was thinner than I remembered, rough and unsteady. "Sweetheart," he started, trying to slip into the fatherly tone I hadn't heard in years. We just need a little help to get through this month. You know how it is. Hard times. Hard times. Harder, apparently, when you spend decades burning every bridge you had and pretending they would rebuild themselves. He continued, words tripping over themselves, painting a picture of bad luck, unexpected expenses, misfortune, but never, ever accountability. Not once did he say, "We were wrong." Not once did he say, "I'm sorry." It was all about what they needed, what they were owed. I took a slow sip of my coffee, letting him fill the silence with desperate, pleading noise. When he finally paused for breath, I spoke, calm, even, unshakable. "I suggest you contact the landlord," I said, "or a lawyer." He tried again, voice cracking now. "You know we don't have anyone else, baby girl." I hung up, mid-sentence, mid-begging, mid-history. I set the phone down gently, like closing the final page of a book I would never reread. The rain outside had eased into a steady drip, the sidewalks glistening under the dull afternoon light. I moved to the window and leaned my forehead against the glass, watching the water slide down in long, lazy streaks. Was it cruel? Maybe. But survival doesn't ask for kindness from the people who abandoned you first. They chose their pride. They chose their negligence. They chose to pretend their hands were clean while expecting mine to stay dirty for them. And I, finally, fully, had chosen myself. The guilt didn't stick anymore. It slid off me like the rain off the glass. They could rebuild if they wanted. They could start fresh, or they could drown in the mess they made. Either way, it wasn't my responsibility. I stood there for a long time, listening to the quiet tap of rain against the window, feeling it settle into my bones, not as sadness, but as clean clear freedom. The storm wasn't coming anymore. It had already passed. And for the first time, I wasn't standing in the wreckage. I was free of it. By the time August rolled around, the sharp biting heat of midsummer had mellowed into golden evenings. The city slowed down, students out for break, families on vacation, the streets quieter. So was I. I stood in my small apartment, barefoot on the warm wooden floor, surveying what I had built. It wasn't much. A second-hand couch I found on Facebook Marketplace, a desk that wobbled if you leaned too hard, a handful of thrift store plants reaching lazily for the sun. But every inch of it was mine. No framed family portraits adorned my walls. Instead, there were certificates of my students' achievements, snapshots of smiling faces at the center I now managed, kids whose names I remembered because I chose to. I brewed a pot of coffee, humming quietly under my breath. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked, and the smell of freshly cut grass wafted through the open window. Life was simple, steady, good. I was arranging books on a low shelf when the knock came at my door, a soft, uncertain sound. Frowning, I wiped my hands on my jeans and opened it. No one there, just a brown package sitting neatly on the welcome mat. No return address. Curious, I carried it inside and sliced it open with my house key. Inside was a simple frame, a photo. Wesley and me, maybe 7 and 10 years old, grinning with missing teeth and sticky hands from too much candy. He had his arms slung over my shoulders, and I was laughing, head thrown back in carefree joy. Tucked behind the frame was a small note, the handwriting shaky but unmistakable. I didn't know what you were carrying. I do now. I'm sorry. L. I sat down hard on the couch, the frame resting in my lap. For a long moment, I just stared at it. The tears that rose weren't for the people they were now. They were for the kids we used to be. The ones who hadn't learned yet that love came with conditions, that loyalty was expected but rarely returned. I set the frame gently on the side table, next to a small, healthy succulent. Maybe that was all the closure I'd ever get. Maybe that was enough. Later that week, after a full day at the center, my coworkers invited me out for drinks. I almost said no, old instincts still whispering that belonging wasn't meant for me, but something stronger pushed me to accept. The bar was small, cozy, strings of fairy lights crisscrossing the ceiling. Laughter bubbled easily from our table, inside jokes forming faster than I could keep up. One of the interns toasted to me, sloshing her drink a little as she declared, "To Davina, the only reason half of us aren't flunking out." Everyone laughed, and I did too, genuine and full. I looked around, faces glowing under the lights, easy camaraderie swirling around us, and realized family isn't always blood. Sometimes family is the people who show up when you aren't perfect, the ones who see you, not what you can give them, not how you make them look, but you. And for the first time I had that. I built it myself. That weekend, feeling oddly light, I decided to try one last time to reconnect with Velma, my aunt. Maybe enough time had passed. Maybe wounds had softened. I crafted a short, polite email. No accusations, no emotional minefields. Just an olive branch. 2 days later, her reply landed. One line. "Hope you're doing well. Take care." Nothing more. No warmth. No acknowledgement. And just like that, I knew. Some bridges weren't just burned. They were never meant to be crossed again. And that, too, was a kind of freedom. On the evening of my birthday, I stood on my small balcony, a slice of cake balanced on the railing, a plastic fork in hand. The sun dipped low over the city, bathing the streets in gold and long shadows. I breathed in deep, the smell of late summer, the hum of distant laughter, the quiet click of possibility unfurling around me. I hadn't just survived them. I survived myself. After everything, if there's one thing I could tell the version of me who stayed too long, hoped too hard, and loved without limits, it's this. You don't owe anyone your self-destruction in the name of loyalty. You are allowed to choose yourself. You are allowed to survive. You are allowed to thrive. Sometimes, the people who are supposed to love us the most are the ones who teach us how to love ourselves by refusing to do it first. And that's not a tragedy. It's a beginning. I hope if you're standing at a crossroads right now, you remember freedom doesn't come from waiting for them to change. It comes from deciding you deserve more, even if you have to walk away to find it. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had to choose yourself over people you once called family? What helped you stay strong when the guilt tried to pull you back? If this story touched your heart, please leave it in the comments or tell me which state you're watching from. And if you didn't quite connect with it, that's okay too. Let me know what you would have done differently and where you're tuning in from. I truly want to hear your voice. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss more real, raw stories like this. Because sometimes, hearing someone else's journey reminds us that we're not alone in ours. Thank you for being here. See you in the next story.
Hey, you stay away from places like this. I was told this by Nick, a supervisor from the same company, just the other day. I had taken a paid leave for today, and he had already made a snide remark about it. Yet here we were, running into each other unexpectedly. The man standing next to him looked like he couldn't possibly lead a decent life. I wanted to run away. In desperation, I maintained minimal defense, but this only ended up infuriating the man even more. Behind me was my wife, looking anxious. We found ourselves in a dire predicament, but the situation took a drastic turn with the appearance of a certain woman. Later on, this incident would profoundly change the lives of Nick and the Mafia man. My name is Kevin. I am 38 years old, a regular office worker in a small to medium-sized company, and I hold the position of section head. I have a wife who is 3 years younger than me, but we don't have children. Right after we got married, my wife was diagnosed with a disease that led to the complete removal of her uterus. This meant that it was no longer possible for us to have children. I thought living just the two of us wasn't too bad, but after the surgery, my wife was quite distressed and often threatened to divorce, blaming herself for ruining my life. Honestly, those days were like living through hell. But by facing my wife head-on and having numerous discussions, we managed to find peace even without children. Going on trips together or enjoying slightly expensive dinners made me feel completely happy. Gradually, my wife started to recover, and around the time I was promoted to section head, an incident occurred. Just before this incident, the previous department head had retired. Sitting in that empty department head seat was Nick in his mid-40s. He was selected to be the department head, but Nick was the nephew of the CEO, Mr. Yale, who had joined the company through connections. Nick, who believed strongly in educational elitism, refused to entrust important tasks to employees with only high school diplomas, delegating only basic tasks to those with college degrees. Naturally, the less educated employees were angry at this unfair assignment of work, while the college graduates complained of the abnormal increase in their workload. Yet all Nick did was shout, "If you have a problem with my methods, leave right now." Remember, I am the nephew of Mr. Yale, and he showed no signs of listening. Since then, Nick began to decide everything based on educational attainment. When a high school graduate tried to attend an important meeting with a client, Nick would say, "You're pointless." A high school grad shouldn't be sticking their nose into this and arbitrarily make changes. Or when a college graduate helped a high school graduate employee, he would say, "Don't pamper them. You are a college grad. You shouldn't need to help such people." Thanks to Nick's arrival, our department became chaotic, and now someone quits almost every month, leading to an abnormal situation. The reason Nick can continue to be arrogant is that our office is a branch, not the main headquarters. Mr. Yale, his uncle, is based at the headquarters and seems to be abroad often, focusing on globalization efforts. Furthermore, our branch manager, Mr. Harvey, is conservative. At first, everyone complained to Mr. Harvey, but now no one does anymore. Mr. Harvey would say, "Endure it." He's the nephew of Mr. Yale, and wouldn't deal with our complaints at all. That's why, unwillingly, we had to accept Nick's tyranny, and our workplace became a place where hardworking people suffer. Thus, those who work earnestly are the quickest to leave. While we do recruit new employees, the people who could train them have left, so no one can teach them. Even if someone could teach, Nick would say, "Don't learn from anyone but a college graduate," and appoint some college-educated employee as the trainer. Consequently, college graduates not only have a heavier workload, but now also have to train new hires, leading some to mistreat the newcomers. This means that the new hires don't develop well, and within 2 or 3 months they leave, worsening the atmosphere further. Employees who can't leave are mostly those with families. They need money for their children's education, their wives are expecting, or they are paying for their parents' care in nursing homes. Everyone has such circumstances, and quitting at such a time would put their families in trouble. Nick knows this and seems to exploit it. If something happens, he would tell the male employees, "If you run away, your wife and kids will suffer, won't they?" And to the female employees, "In this day and age, no one would hire a woman with kids like you if you leave such a good company." Everyone is looking for a job change, but it's hard to find a good place, and knowing that others will suffer if they leave makes it difficult for them to actually quit. I am one of those people. Recently, my wife and I have been planning something, so I cannot afford to be unemployed. Additionally, our income greatly affects our plans. Therefore, I absolutely have to find a company that offers better conditions and is okay in terms of salary. It's hard to find such a company, and my job hunting efforts aren't going well. This method of Nick's, taking employees' families hostage, puts everyone under immense stress. Gradually, the branch's performance started to decline. Annoyed, Mr. Harvey forced us into unreasonable overtime and mandated work on holidays, creating a chaotic situation. I was living amidst the uncertainty. Perhaps due to such a lifestyle, my spirit was considerably drained. But then, unexpectedly, I received a call from someone. It was from my mother, who lives far away with my sister. "Mike's 3rd death anniversary is coming up, so come back home. And isn't Kate's birthday soon? She's always been so focused on the house and hasn't married, always staying single. Let's at least celebrate with just us." Though I had planned to return for my father's 3rd death anniversary, it was surprising that my mother wanted to celebrate Kate's birthday. In our family, the women are quite strong, and usually, my sister and my mother have been at the forefront of everything. I remember my father saying with a laugh that I couldn't hold a candle to the way my mother and my sister officially managed the house. Of course, my wife was invited too, and when I checked with her, she was happy about it. So I replied okay to my mother and had already submitted a leave application at work. As expected, Nick sneered, "Taking leave? It's such a busy time, huh? Well, there's limited stuff a high school grad like you can do anyway. Do as you like." At least we had planned to take leave on Friday, fly back with my wife, and meet my mother at a restaurant she had chosen on Saturday night. Then the day arrived. The traffic's bad, and the taxi isn't moving much. "Sorry, but could you go ahead without me?" Having just received this message from my mother, my wife, and I decided to go ahead into the restaurant. We had reserved a private room in the back, but had to pass the counter seats to get there. As we were being led by the staff, a voice called out from the side, "Hey, isn't that you, Kevin? Wondered what you'd do taking leave. A date with your wife in the distant suburbs. I don't mind, but it's a shame the burden falls on other employees. Actually, what's a guy like you doing in a nice place like this?" Turning around, there was Nick with his usual irritating smirk. I had heard from a colleague that Nick was also going back home or something, and he had dumped his work on others before leaving on Friday. Beside him sat a burly man who clearly didn't seem like a decent person. He scrutinized me from head to toe as if sizing me up. Feeling uncomfortable, I tried to pass by with a brief greeting, but Nick grabbed my arm to stop me. "Wait a minute. Since we're here, let me introduce you to this guy. This is my friend Tucker, and this is one of my subordinates, not much to show for himself. just a bottom feeder with only a high school diploma. Before I could say anything, Nick condescendingly introduced me. As Nick spoke, the mafia-looking man named Tucker said, "Oh really? But you dress pretty nice. Looks like you have money, huh? Hey, since it's such a rare occasion, why don't you join us for a drink today? Of course, you're treating. Even though you look younger, well, age aside, you're paying anyway." Feeling a bad premonition, I instinctively protected my wife by standing in front of her. "I cannot do that. I have plans to dine with my family today," I refused. Tucker's face stiffened instantly. His irritation became apparent as he started fidgeting restlessly. Nick had a look of exasperation as if saying, "Just go along with it." I had no time to deal with these guys, so I turned on my heel to head to the private room, but an irritated Tucker said, "Wait," and continued, "Don't you see? I'm a mafia collecting protection money around here. Do you understand what happens if you defy me? Is it okay if something happens to your wife behind you? Huh?" Tucker's gaze alone was intimidating enough to make one tremble, and for a moment my legs froze. My wife looked at me with concern and anxiety. I could simply give Tucker and Nick some money to resolve this for the safety of my wife, but it didn't feel right to yield to such tactics. I struggled to control a strong impulse and responded firmly, "No matter what, I will not comply with your demands." Just as I spoke, Tucker, seemingly reaching his limit, abruptly stood up from his chair. "What are you doing?" A commanding voice echoed through the small restaurant. Everyone's gaze shifted to the entrance, where a petite woman was standing. Startled, I checked the time. About 5 minutes had passed since we entered. Wearing large sunglasses and sporting nearly blonde long hair, she exuded an impressive aura. For a moment, I thought I saw Tucker's eyes waver. Meanwhile, Nick, unaware of who the woman was, shouted at her, "Who are you, lady? Outsiders should keep their mouths shut." Ignoring his words, the woman approached us with a click of her high heels. Then to me, she said, "You, if you're even the son of Mike, you need to pull yourself together. I feel embarrassed as your sister." Surprisingly, I was the one being scolded. Scratching my head, I apologized, "Sorry, Kate." At that, Tucker let out an almost scream-like shout, his sister. To Nick, it must have seemed irrelevant that the sister I was going to have dinner with had appeared. But to Tucker, my sister Kate seemed to be someone special. He started trembling as he looked at her. Nick was taken aback and asked him, "What's wrong?" Ignoring Nick, Tucker greeted her energetically, "Kate, it's been a while." Kate slightly shifted her pitch-black sunglasses to look at Tucker and burst out laughing. "Oh, it's you, Tucker. I was wondering who dared mess with my brother and sister, huh?" By the end of her sentence, her expression had turned serious, and Tucker seemed only capable of trembling. Nick, still not understanding the situation, looked back and forth between us. As Tucker desperately told him, "Nick, you better apologize. It's for your own good," Nick seemed to grasp what was happening. Nick slowly apologized to her. Sighing, she turned to Tucker and asked, "Who taught you to be a nuisance to others? Me or Mom? Surely not Dad, right?" Tucker shook his head vigorously, denying her words. Nick whispered to Tucker, "Who is this woman?" Eyes wide, Tucker corrected him. "How dare you say this woman? She's the underboss of our mafia family." Realizing everything, Nick trembled as he uttered, "Even a woman and the underboss of a mafia family?" This was a sensitive point for her. At Nick's words, her eyebrows twitched and her face contorted with displeasure. Though Tucker had been pale with fear before, now his face turned completely white. Indeed, as Tucker said, she is the underboss set to take over the top spot of a mafia family. She is actually feared by the members. Typically, men dominate the top ranks of the mafia, and many might have heard of the term gangster's wife. When our father was the head, our mother was that gangster's wife. But after his sudden death, she temporarily became the acting head. Of course, there were calls for me, the eldest son, to be the next head, but I stepped down. Marrying a civilian wife and not wanting to involve her were my main reasons, but I also believed I lacked the ability to lead a mafia family. Despite some insistence on having a male head, it was Kate who silenced them with her capability. She has always been tough, with a strong sense of justice and a deep love for family. She might have been looked down upon for being a woman, as Nick said, but she brushed off those words and secured her position. She had faced many challenges, but they only made her mentally stronger, and she is now eager to relieve our mother of her burdens. Now, no one dares to belittle her as just a woman. Everyone knows she dislikes that term, and all members of our mafia family agree that she is the rightful next boss. Tucker repeatedly begged for forgiveness from her, and Nick, having heard the conversation, realized she was no ordinary woman. For once, Nick's arrogance faded, and he trembled noticeably. Then, in contrast to my formidable sister, a carefree voice sounded, "Sorry I'm late." Oh, what's this? Needless to say, it was our mother. Tucker, regretting messing with me, looked at me with teary eyes. My mother quickly grasped the situation and turned to Tucker, asking, "Aren't you the boy from back then?" It seems quite tense here, but can you explain what's happening? Overwhelmed by my mother's commanding aura, Tucker kept apologizing. To a confused Nick, I explained, "As you can see, Tucker is a member of the mafia family led by our mother, the current head, and my sister, the next head." Tanner stared at Kate and me, his teeth chattering. With a sigh, Kate suggested, "Let's not disturb the other customers here. Let's talk in the private room in the back." Tucker, looking utterly deflated, had no choice but to agree. Nick, having relied on Tucker's authority, clearly lacked the courage to challenge someone who even Tucker obediently followed. He replied in a voice as faint as a mosquito's and followed us timidly. We took our seats and ordered drinks. After hearing some of the situation from Kate, our mother spoke to Tucker in a low, grave tone. "How dare you disgrace our family's name in such a place? The worlds of the street and the mafia are different. You should know better." The usual swagger drained from Tucker as he faced the stern reproach from our mother, the current head of our family. He was profusely apologetic. Next, my mother turned her attention to Nick, who was frozen in place, not moving an inch. Having no courage to fight against them, Nick looked down, sending me a look as if begging for help. I'm sure Nick also believed that I wouldn't come to his rescue, but he knew all too well that it was only now, after he had repeatedly been sarcastic towards me, that he found it convenient. Indeed, the way Nick looked at me seemed less hopeful and more like a faint glimmer of hope. In the worst case, he might be crushed by our family. If Mr. Yale ever found out about this, Nick could be demoted from his managerial position for colluding with the mafia. As the saying goes, the eyes are the windows to the soul. Nick spoke volumes with his eyes alone. I sighed softly and spoke to my mother, who looked like she was about to explode in anger. It's partly my fault. I should have stood up for myself instead of backing down. Both Nick and Tucker looked stunned, as if they had never expected me to defend them, their faces showing a glimmer of hope. Kate then said to me, "Are you showing them mercy? From what I just heard, that person looked down on you just because you only finished high school and practically humiliated you in public. You're still going to forgive him?" Nick, at a loss for words, tightly closed his eyes. Tucker started to look visibly nervous. My mother remained silent, observing the situation. I slowly began to speak, sharing my thoughts. "I don't like conflicts. You two should know this best. Don't resolve matters by force, but by dialogue. Wasn't that Dad's favorite saying? I may not be as strong as you and the others, but I can engage in dialogue." With that, I straightened my posture and looked Nick in the eye. Nick seemed momentarily confused, but then returned my gaze seriously. "You were anxious, weren't you?" Being the nephew of Mr. Yale, you feared not being taken seriously, and your focus on academic credentials stems from your own struggles to pass entrance exams for a prestigious university. While that's an achievement to be proud of, it doesn't mean that all employees who didn't go to college have given up or dropped out. Isn't society about understanding and respecting each other, helping one another? Nick had nothing to say in response. Instead, Tucker spoke up. I'm sorry. I was just bluffing. Like Nick, I have a sister suffering from a chronic illness, and Kate helped with the medical expenses. I wasn't aware of that. As I looked towards Kate, she shrugged and said, Tucker's sister is your age. His brother was originally a part of our family and was a great ally of mine. So, for Tucker and his sister, they're like family to me. I helped out with the medical costs with my own money and some from our mother. It's my way of returning the favor since his brother always stood by me, even when I felt isolated. While I was surprised to hear about this connection between her and Tucker, it seemed just like her to go to such lengths. My mother also silently approved of what Kate was doing as the next head of the family. Tucker apologized again for his misconduct. Even though I was unaware, I ended up repaying your kindness with betrayal. You said you would cover the full amount, but I'll work and pay it all back. Before Kate and my mother could respond, I said, There's no need for that. Tucker looked back at me, surprised. I continued to express my thoughts. Indeed, what you did could have tarnished our family's reputation. I live in the civilian world now, detached from the family business, but such actions could inconvenience Kate, my mother, and the members, especially your brother. Pausing for a moment, Tucker seemed to take my words to heart, giving me a serious look. I added, But you've managed to apologize properly. Normally, one might make excuses to justify their actions. You could easily say that since I'm no longer involved with the family business, it's none of my business, but you didn't resort to such tactics. Instead, you admitted your mistakes openly. I don't think Kate and the others would impose further punishment on someone like that. With that, as if breaking the tension, my mother burst out laughing. I was momentarily flustered, thinking I had said something odd. But then she, no longer the head of our family, but as a mother, said to me, You're becoming more and more like your father. Normally, I would have to condemn Tucker for tarnishing the family's name, but as you said, he's taken responsibility and apologized. This time, I'll forgive him for your sake. I was relieved. Honestly, it was almost a gamble whether my mother would let Tucker off the hook. Since my father's death, she has led with unmistakable authority to ensure she wasn't underestimated, resolving conflicts within the family with decisiveness. Kate, too, had made considerable efforts to demonstrate her capabilities, deeply understanding what it means to be part of the mafia. Whether to forgive Tucker was a delicate matter, but I was relieved that my words had an impact. Tucker, likely never expecting this outcome, teared up and grasped my hand, saying, Thank you for protecting me, even though I was so rude. Out of the blue, I slowly shook my head in response to his words. I hadn't really protected Tucker. I had simply stood by my own principles and followed through with them. When I explained this, Tucker, deeply moved, said, You are my hero, and showed respect for me, even though I'm younger than him. Feeling a bit odd, I asked him to stop saying that. Please don't say it like that. That's not really my style, I said hesitantly. Perhaps finding it amusing, Kate burst out laughing, dispelling the somber mood, and my mother suggested we toast with some beers that were just brought out. While looking apologetic, Tucker accepted a beer mug. However, Nick, who had been silent until then, politely declined and said, I need to cool off outside. Tucker, stay here, before he stood up and left the restaurant. I debated whether to follow Nick, but finding no words to comfort him at the moment, I decided to let him be. Ultimately, with one more person, we went ahead and celebrated Kate's birthday as planned, enjoying a delightful meal together. Nick didn't return to the restaurant after that. Having completed my father's memorial service, I returned to the apartment where I live with my wife. When I went to work as usual the following Monday, something felt off. The office, which had been frantic lately, was unusually calm and settled today. I went to my desk and asked a colleague next to me what happened. Apparently, Nick had been transferred or something, and someone who came in temporarily this morning was now in charge. Thanks to him reverting the work assignments Nick had messed up, the daily chaos had settled down. We, the high school graduate employees, had been idle for a while, so we started to regain our motivation. Meanwhile, the college graduate employees finally had some breathing room. 6 months after Nick suddenly disappeared, the department had returned to its previous calm state. One day, on my way home, I heard children's voices from the park and instinctively looked in that direction. There, in a suit, Nick was sitting on a bench. I hurried over and called out, "Nick." He turned around in surprise and smiled weakly. It was a surreal scene. 2 middle-aged men sitting on a park bench, but I didn't mind and listened to Nick. I've never met someone with a heart as clean as yours, and it made me feel ashamed of myself. Everything you said back then hit the nail on the head. I was panicking, resenting the high school grads for not having it as tough as me, just fueling my own competitiveness. That realization made it impossible for me to go back to the office. He accepted a cup of coffee I bought from a nearby convenience store. As he thanked me and drank it, Nick's profile looked somewhat lonely. Right after that incident, he confessed everything he had done to his uncle, Mr. Yale, and asked for a disciplinary leave of his own accord. Starting that Monday, Nick had taken voluntary leave and proceeded with his resignation without telling any of us. Apparently, he couldn't face us. He had been job hunting since then, but it wasn't going well. Realizing how much he had relied on connections for his job before joining our company, he had been living as a part-time worker, having quit a well-known company within a year despite graduating from a prestigious university. Unable to cope with the reality that there were always bigger fish, worried about such a nephew, Mr. Yale had given him a chance at our company. Lost for words, I hesitated. But then, Nick, in contrast to his earlier demeanor, smiled brightly and said, "I've realized just how flawed I am. I can't stay here. I've decided to apprentice under the owner of the restaurant where Tucker works. It's a fresh start, but this time I feel like I can pull it through." Surprised by his story, it turned out that Tucker had stopped his half-hearted involvement with the mafia family and started working as a restaurant chef. That place was a restaurant his sister used to visit when she was healthy. He was determined to make meals for her once she was allowed to leave the hospital or come home temporarily. Of course, Kate hadn't billed him for the medical expenses, but Tucker had decided to save up a significant amount to repay her someday. Inspired by Tucker's actions, Nick decided to join him as an apprentice for his own self-reflection. The restaurant owner was short on hands and grateful for the help, and Nick was set to leave by plane the next day. "This is probably my last time wearing a suit and walking through the city. I sat here because the sunset looks the most beautiful from this spot," he explained. After listening to him, various words came to mind, but what I needed to say to Nick right then weren't words of consolation or encouragement. Slowly, I raised my head and looked towards Nick, saying, "Take care." Surprised by my unexpected farewell, Nick briefly showed a stunned expression, but quickly smiled and replied, "Yeah, I'll be off then. You take care too." 3 years passed. I visited my hometown again and knocked on the family home's gate. Instead of the typical scene of underlings lined up, I leisurely walked down the path leading to the house, taking in the view of the garden. Upon seeing us, my mother immediately brightened up with a big smile and exclaimed, "Welcome back." Then, without paying much attention to me, she immediately turned to my wife and said, "I know it's been tough, but please continue to support him." My wife responded with a smile and handed a precious baby she was carrying to my mother. Carefully cradling her, my mother looked at her peaceful sleeping face and said, "Hello there, Grandma's here." Yes, we had welcomed a new life into our family. Since my wife doesn't have a uterus, this child isn't our biological offspring. Although the child came to us through special adoption, she's already an important part of our family. We had been planning this special adoption for a long time. The screening was rigorous, and there were many couples waiting for a child, so it took over 3 years for our turn to come around. But having finally been able to welcome a child into our family, we brought her to my mother, who had been looking forward to this moment. In fact, the child's birth mother was from this area, which was one of the reasons we moved here after the adoption. It took a while for us to settle down, and for me to feel comfortable showing the child to my mother, but she was visibly overjoyed to meet her grandchild. My wife also gazed lovingly at our child. For me, it wasn't important whether the child was born to my wife or not. What mattered was that this child had come into our lives, and I felt it meaningful to raise her as our own. My mother felt the same, and even Kate, who joined us later and is typically known as a formidable figure in the mafia, wore a gentle smile. Children are remarkable. For the sake of this child's future, I would sever ties completely with my mother and Kate. My wife and I had many doubts about this. After all, it wasn't my idea, but one that my mother and others had decided upon after months of deliberation following the child's arrival. We decided to respect their decision. Thus, today was the first and last day for my mother and others to meet this child. Given the circumstances, we left the child with my mother for a while, and my wife and I went to a restaurant. It was just past the busy lunch hour, so the restaurant was quiet with few other customers. As we entered, we were greeted with a hearty welcome. As we took our seats, a familiar face, now a waiter, brought us a menu and cheerfully said, "Long time no see. Today's special is grilled chicken made by Nick. It's really the best." My wife and I burst out laughing, and from the back of the kitchen came Nick's embarrassed shout, "Stop it, that's not my special." The restaurant owner joined in the laughter, and I could tell that these three had built a good relationship. Tucker's sister was still hospitalized, but she had recently been granted temporary leave and had come to this restaurant to eat some of Tucker's specials. Tucker's dream had come true, and it seemed he now had a new goal: to open a new restaurant with Nick. How these two became friends was still a mystery, but it was clear they were bound by an invisible strong bond. After finishing our meal and getting ready to pay, I encouraged them. Keep up the good work. Nick, who once had a troubled expression, and Tucker, who used to tremble in fear, were no more. Both responded with bright smiles. Yes, life exists as uniquely as there are people, and if one were to look into their history, they would find a mix of highs and lows. Feeling that I had glimpsed a part of that, I felt strangely moved. I would now build a life with my newly adopted daughter and my family. With that prospect of future joys, my wife and I left the restaurant hand in hand. You're a high school graduate working as a janitor. H. Suits you well. Loser back in middle school. There was this classmate who seemed to have it out for me, no matter what. She was a smart girl who even served as a class representative, but she always kept to herself. This girl really disliked me and would pick on me at every opportunity. I had no idea why, but after I pointed something out to her, she completely turned against me. We went our separate ways after high school and lost touch, but I never imagined we'd run into each other at company. Her attitude towards me hadn't changed a bit since middle school. She still looked down on me. "Crawling on the floor and cleaning is just right for you," she said with a mocking laugh in response. My secretary tore up her resume right in front of her. "Leave right now. Did you come to the interview here without knowing anything? My name is Alexander." Pretty cool and old-fashioned, right? Even so, maybe it was hard for kids to call me that, so in kindergarten, everyone called me Alex. Now I'm happily married to a woman I met during high school. We support each other and work together every day. It's busy and tough, but were living fulfilling days. I wouldn't say I have a cleaning obsession, but I really like to clean. I need to keep not only myself, but also my surroundings clean to be satisfied. Each room has a lint roller ready, and there are 2 trash cans in each room. I can't stand things being left out, and I get restless if things aren't in their proper place. The same goes for my appearance. I hate it if my clothes aren't washed and ironed. Even if a bit of wrinkle is considered stylish for some clothes, I'd iron them. That's why I couldn't accept jeans with intentional damage that were popular for a while. But, of course, coming home tired from work, it's better to be welcomed by a clean room than a dirty one. It's like a trade I was born with, so no matter how tired I am, I never skip cleaning. Cleaning also helps me relieve stress, so it's ultimately for my own good. People who don't know me well often think I have a cleaning obsession, and I not only like cleaning my room myself, but also enjoy watching others clean. Watching everyone cooperate in cleaning from a step back is something I like to observe. Many people struggle with cleaning and tidying up. That's why observing someone who can move efficiently feels like I can learn about their strengths in areas I wouldn't know from their regular work. I like discovering these unseen aspects through cleaning. My wife Charlotte has a strict personality when it comes to manners and etiquette. As a matter of course, I've always said I'm off and I'm home even when I was living alone. But the most stringent aspect was the attitude towards others. No matter the circumstances, I would never forgive someone who belittles others or hurled insults in front of a third party. If someone dared to do such a thing in front of Charlotte, they'd get a lecture. I've been in such situations a few times, but it was in those moments that I found Charlotte quite intimidating and firmly told myself I must watch my behavior and choice of words around Charlotte. Speaking of grooming, it brings back a memory. This was back when I was in middle school. I believe everyone has their own values, but there was one classmate who was awkwardly trying to connect with me. This classmate was a girl named Sophia, who served as the class representative at the time. Sophia was one of the top students in our class. Apparently, both of her parents had attended and graduated from top universities, and it seemed like academic excellence ran in her family. Maybe that's why she was raised with the mindset that being the best was the norm. She always kept people at a distance, winning was expected, and she believed she always had to be on top, leading and giving orders. This belief was as natural to her as breathing. Even though I thought it was a twisted view, I didn't say anything since she seemed okay with it, especially since Sophia was solely focused on her studies, and I was the one who always competed with her for the top spot in our grade. Perhaps because my parents were also academically inclined, I had always had a good memory since I was young. I studied for tests, but if I paid attention during regular classes, I didn't need to cram to score well. I wouldn't say this out loud, though, to avoid sounding boastful. But for me, preparing for tests was just a review. For Sophia, it must have been frustrating not to be the clear number one in her eyes. I was nothing but an obstacle. I had no intention of competing with Sophia, but by our 3rd year in middle school, she started to make snarky remarks every time she outperformed me. "Oh, Alexander, did you have an off day this time?" I was feeling a bit under the weather on the test day and thought I wouldn't make it to the top. "Was it difficult for you?" She implied that she was clearly at the top of the class and laughed, saying, "Oh, you didn't understand such an easy question. Are you sure you're reviewing properly, Alexander?" While Sophia's grades were indeed excellent, her social skills and grooming left much to be desired. The girls around us were starting to take an interest in fashion and made efforts to look cute within the school rules, but Sophia's interests were solely academic with no concern for fashion. She had the classic nerdy look with braided pigtails and thick glasses, but nobody dared to point this out to her. Although Sophia was a top student, her condescending attitude meant she had no friends. She didn't seem to care, though, and spent her breaks reading alone at her desk. Among the girls starting to embrace fashion, she stood out for not fitting in. Among the boys, she was referred to behind her back as a nerdy girl. One day, thinking I was doing her a favor, I decided to give her some advice. Sophia, aren't you interested in fashion, You know, like trying contacts or changing your hairstyle. Just removing her glasses could change her impression, and if contacts were too scary, switching to more fashionable glasses could still transform her look. And her hairstyle could use a change too. Letting down her braids for a ponytail or even cutting it to a bob could make a big difference. I thought even trimming her bangs could make her face appear brighter. Maybe you make some friends then. Shut up. Sophia suddenly became furious at my suggestion. She stood up abruptly, throwing a book at me. I don't need to hear that from you. I was just trying to help. That's called meddling. None of your business. What's it to you anyway? Looks are subjective. I like my glasses and hairstyle as they are. Just leave me alone. Sophia's loud retort drew the attention of the entire class, and from that point on, she looked at me even more critically than before. Even though Sophia glared at me until graduation, I endured it, thinking that our association would end with middle school. Anyway, naturally, Sophia's path was to attend a prestigious school. She might have been influenced by the expectations of those around her and her parents. On the other hand, I chose a regular public high school. When Sophia found out, she came up to my desk, puffing her chest out in triumph. Alexander, I hear you're going to a public high school. Yeah, so what? It's a shame. I thought I could compete with you here as well. I'm going to the top school in the county, so we might not see each other again. I truly hope so, from the bottom of my heart. Continuing to face such an attitude in high school would probably drive me to the brink of stress. I've always been someone with little desire for competition. I don't cling to material things, and I can easily give up something if it means competing with someone else for it. Besides, attending a prestigious school would likely require a lot of money. My family is just an average middle-class household. Both my parents are intelligent, but they've never been interested in climbing the corporate ladder, believing that a balanced life without excess is best. So we've always lived modestly. That's why I chose a school that was convenient and affordable. There's no shame in it. Since the school's academic level was average, it was also at this high school that I met Charlotte, who would become my wife. Therefore, I can confidently say that my choice was the right one. My meeting with Charlotte started with me falling for her at first sight. She was straightforward, disliking dishonesty, and had a no-nonsense personality which seemed to put off some students. But more than that, she was surrounded by many female friends. Charlotte was serious, but also knew how to blend in with those around her like a typical high school girl. She wore makeup within the school rules and matched accessories with her friends. I secretly admired Charlotte from afar. We were in different classes, our electives and committees were also different, so I wanted to find a way to connect. But there were no opportunities for interaction. I was almost ready to give up, but it seems that fate was on my side. By chance, I ended up working at the same part-time job as Charlotte, which was introduced to me by a senior. The job was at a small bookstore. Charlotte worked the counter while I handled stocking new books, weekly magazines, and journals. The weight of the magazines could be quite heavy in large numbers. I was prepared for the physical demand, but by the time I finished, my back and arms ached terribly. During a break, I found myself massaging my back in the storeroom. Embarrassingly, this turned out to be the first chance for Charlotte and me to converse. Huh, you look beat. Good job, Alexander. Thanks. We're from the same high school, right? You know about me. I was thrilled, and my heart raced at the thought that she knew me. I wasn't a standout like Charlotte, so I assumed I was unnoticed. I was even prepared to graduate without ever being recognized by her. Because it's a cool name. Alexander has an old-fashioned ring to it. Yeah, I like it too. Charlotte started to close the distance between us, and I was secretly celebrating inside. After that, we began talking about high school at our part-time job, and even started chatting at school. We would greet each other in the hallways and even started lending and borrowing textbooks when we ended up in the same class. As we moved up the grades, we would often engage in lively conversations in the classroom. Charlotte was always popular, and she was constantly surrounded by people. Feeling anxious about this situation, I decided to confess my feelings to her on the way home from our part-time job. "I like you. Will you go out with me?" It wasn't a cool way to confess, but I just expressed my feelings directly in a straightforward manner. That was all I, a clumsy person, could do in the dimly lit street after our part-time job without any romantic atmosphere or mood. Charlotte accepted me. We smoothly started dating from there and graduated from high school. We didn't go on to university together, but instead decided to work at the headquarters introduced by our part-time job manager. Furthermore, the manager acted as a matchmaker, and they were able to get married. Everything seemed to fall into place smoothly since meeting Charlotte, and I cherished my happiness. One day, as I was diligently cleaning at the company as usual, a shadow fell in front of me. Because I was mopping the floor, I could tell from the feet that the shadow belonged to a woman wearing a recruit suit and high heels. And when I looked up to see the face, I was startled. Sophia. It was Sophia, my classmate from middle school, with whom I had lost touch since graduation. It seemed Sophia had started to care a bit more about her appearance compared to back then. Her glasses were now half-rimmed, and she had a fashionable hairstyle held up with a black scrunchie. However, her makeup didn't seem quite right, as if she wasn't used to it or it didn't suit her. "Ha-ha." Sophia looked down at me and chuckled. She puffed up her cheeks, crossed her arms, and lifted the corners of her mouth. "Are you the one crawling around here, Alexander?" "Hey, Sophia. Long time no see. Are you seriously doing this as a job?" "The janitor? Ha-ha. Oh dear, have you fully embraced being a loser?" As Sophia said all this in one breath, I secretly thought to myself, same as ever. She didn't raise her voice, but her condescending attitude hadn't changed. No, it might have even powered up. "Alexander, you didn't pursue further studies even though there are jobs out there, even for high school graduates. Choosing to be a cleaner, isn't that too much to think about? You were my rival during middle school. That's enough." As Sophia continued to look down on me and spew sarcasm, Charlotte's voice sharply cut through. Charlotte's gaze was stern. Even as her husband, I felt a chill run through me at her expression. "What now, Charlotte? In front of a fledgling?" Sophia pulled out a document and showed it to us. It was Sophia's resume, with Sophia written in the name section. Seeing that we had recognized it, Charlotte quickly tore it down the middle. The sound of the paper tearing was followed by more tearing until it was shredded beyond repair. "What are you doing? Do you even realize whom you were talking to?" "Huh, the person cleaning over there. That's our president, Mr. Johnson." "President? Seriously? Coming here without even researching the president of the company you're applying to? We don't need to interview someone like you. Please leave." Charlotte pointed sharply towards the exit, and inside, I thought, scary. While Sophia was busy studying at university, I had been working hard at the headquarters, learning the ropes from seniors and superiors. Through hard work and gradually improving performance, the president advised me that I was better suited to starting my own business rather than working under someone else. He was truly kind to me until the end, passing on books that inspired him during his own entrepreneurial journey, and even taking me to networking parties with other business owners, introducing me to many valuable contacts. With such support from those around me, Charlotte and I discussed it and decided to start our own company. I was actually aware that Sophia had applied to our company when her application came through. I wondered if it was some mistake, but enough time had passed since middle school, and Charlotte thought it was okay, so I let her application proceed to the interview stage. Charlotte was in charge of everything that followed. I trusted Charlotte's judgment and strictness in manners. She has a keen eye for people. That's why I'd entrusted her with the roles of my secretary and HR director. Our company, though small, has successfully attracted talented individuals and expanded its business. I believe this success is solely due to Charlotte's exceptional ability to evaluate people. As the HR director, Charlotte took action against Sophia. Even if you were a classmate of President Johnson, it doesn't matter. We don't hire people who lack the basic etiquette expected of a working professional. What do you mean? I graduated from a top university in active service. So what? Weren't you the one who always had it in for him during middle school? Always acting snide towards him. In the professional world, your academic background isn't as important as having common sense and basic decency. Sophia fell silent under Charlotte's relentless words. Essentially, Charlotte was saying Sophia lacked common sense. If you still want to join our company, carefully consider what I've said and start over from square one. That day, Sophia was sent home without even being allowed to interview. Later, I heard from a middle school friend about some rumors circulating in our hometown regarding this incident. Despite attending a prestigious school, Sophia wasn't as exceptional as she or others thought. She wasn't the top student, and she didn't get into top-tier universities. To make matters worse, her younger sister was highly talented and got into one of the nation's top universities straight out of high school. The difference between them had been evident since childhood, and Sophia was constantly compared to her sister by relatives and her parents. Why can't she be more like her sister? Really, who does she take after? It seems she was treated harshly by her own parents, likely feeling quite out of place at home. Desperate for the recognition, she neglected fashion and socializing with classmates, focusing solely on her studies. To her, someone like me, who often ranked first in our grade, was nothing but an obstacle. Understanding the background made her intense rivalry more comprehensible. Then, my friend started saying something strange. Weren't you the only one who paid attention to Sophia? Maybe she had a crush on you. What? She treated me like trash, you know. Like how kids are mean to those they actually like. That's what was suggested. But the only time I initiated contact with Sophia was when I commented on her grooming. Other than that, it was always Sophia who picked fights with me, and she seemed to have regarded me as an enemy ever since the grooming comment. If what my friend said was true, then Sophia might be even more awkward than I am. Perhaps she had her own way of reaching out, but at the time, I was not comfortable around Sophia and had no interest in romance, so I wouldn't have noticed anyway. Sophia's awkwardness hasn't changed, has it? But I did leave her many hints when I said, "Come back after you've thought it over." I didn't say, "Don't ever come back." She can figure it out if she thinks about it, right? Aha. If she was listening properly in that state, that is. Even though I heard about it from you, I didn't expect it to be that bad. She seemed like someone not used to dealing with people. Faced with Charlotte's sharp assessment, I could only offer a wry smile without a response. Sophia might have been harshly judged by her family, but she was undoubtedly intelligent, with her intellect and capabilities. I hope this experience frees her from her past constraints and helps her rediscover her true potential. Once she comes down, she'll notice the hints Charlotte gave her, and I hope she'll come back for another interview. I sincerely hope that everything moves in a positive direction. You shouldn't bother going to a matchmaking party you're not excited about, especially when it's just to make up the numbers. I knew that, but somehow I ended up attending. That day, it felt like fate played a prank on me with the meeting that awaited. I'm Alex, 28 years old. I have a bit of an unusual job. Even though it's unusual, it's not that I'm bad with people or that I dislike them. I have a fair number of friends, and girlfriends are always around, it seems. I'm less attached than others. I've never had a long-term relationship. Probably there's something wrong with me. I usually don't think too deeply about it, just shrug it off with an "oh well." Again, because of this, I'm often teased by female friends as being cold. That day, I was a bit irritated as work wasn't going as planned. My work clothes were dirtier than usual, a sign that my frustration was out of the ordinary. At that moment, I got a call from an old college friend, Jason. "Alex, can you come to a matchmaking party? Someone who was supposed to come got sick, and we're short on people," Jason said in his usual light tone. He's been known as a matchmaking party pro since our college days. He's got a wide network and is guaranteed to organize a successful event. Since college, he's been responsible for many marriages through his parties. With my hands dirty, I turned my phone on speaker, sat down on the workbench, and lit a cigarette. This is sudden, as always. It looks like I don't even have time to change. I exhale a thin stream of smoke along with my words, watching the elegant swirl of smoke in the air. "I thought it looked beautiful. The place is near your workshop, just come as you are," he said. The place he mentioned is a slightly upscale French bistro. I visit it often because it's so close. I'm well acquainted with the owner there, so showing up in work clothes is nothing unusual. "No problem at all. I'm in if you pay for it." I heard his clicking tongue through the speaker in response to my reply. "You're not broke, just always looking to take advantage," his reply, half joking as always. Nothing has changed since our college days. He indicated that the matchmaking party would start in 15 minutes. I told him I'd be a bit late and hung up. To shift my mood, I snuffed out my cigarette and an empty beer can and reevaluated the day's work on my workbench. Not satisfied with anything, with a swing of my fist, I violently crushed the day's work. After confirming it had lost its original form, I sighed deeply. Another day wasted. My profession? A sculptor. That's my title. The crushed piece was now just a lump of clay, not a slump, I reassured myself as I left the studio. The matchmaking party would be a nice change of pace. I was fed up with myself, wishing somewhere in the depths of my heart that it was. Or so I wondered. If I should at least change my clothes, even if it was just to make up the numbers, I decided to head to the restaurant where the party was to be held in my work clothes. Jason mentioned that he had gathered mostly secretaries for the event. I was curious to see how they'd react to my attire. When I arrived, everyone was already there, and Jason informed me they had just finished toasting. The other male attendees were in suits, fresh from work. Some even wore lawyer badges. Apparently, he had gathered a well-paid crowd today. "Sorry I'm late." I briefly apologized and took a seat in an empty seat. From behind the open kitchen counter, the chef, who owned this restaurant, saw me and slightly raised his hand to greet me. I nodded back slyly. "This is my college friend Alex. He's also 28, same as me." Jason introduced me to the women attending. That was the first time I saw the attending women, and to say the least, they were impressive. Their makeup and nails were immaculately done. Their slender, pale fingers looked as if they'd never touched a household chore. A tilt of their heads released a soft, floral fragrance. All of them were equally beautiful and charming, speaking in high, gentle voices. The woman sitting diagonally across from me was particularly striking. I sipped the beer that had been brought to me as I thought about the fact that such a beautiful woman would also attend a matchmaking party. For a while, I didn't join in on the conversation, focusing instead on quenching my dry throat. During this time, I noticed something. The exceptionally beautiful woman sitting diagonally across was intentionally avoiding looking at me. She was clearly ignoring me. Apparently, she had no interest in a guy in dirty work clothes. To say she was uninterested would be an understatement. It seemed more like she harbored a slight disgust towards me. "Alex, you don't have a girlfriend right now, do you?" Caught off guard, I responded with a dull nope. That's when the beautiful woman finally looked my way. A little too much makeup, but still beautiful, as I recalled. Her name was Jessica. Surprising if you've ever had a girlfriend. She suddenly turned her attention to me, her eyes looking at me almost as if I were a stray dog. "Well, I've had a girlfriend now and then, I replied nonchalantly, facing her overt hostility. Despite the tense atmosphere between Jessica and me, the guy sitting next to her seemed completely unaware. He was engrossed in conversation with the woman sitting in front of him. It appeared that Jessica was displeased with his lack of attention, resulting in her bad mood. In short, it was her taking it out on me. Look around you. Don't you see how out of place you are? She smirked in a mocking way. It seemed her comment was directed at the fact that I was sitting here in my work clothes. I wasn't told there was a dress code. You know what common sense tells you. You're coming to a party with us. It's rude. Her voice grew louder. The other members started to notice our quarrel. Oh, wait, Jessica. I asked Alex to come over on short notice, and the reason we're wearing suits is because this is our work attire. Alex is just dressed for work as well. Jason tried to mediate between us, half jokingly. Still, she didn't stop belittling me. You know what? Let me be the first to clarify something. You all are too kind to say. She said this as she looked around at the other women. It seemed she positioned herself as the queen bee among the group. Everyone avoided eye contact with Jessica. Why don't you go home, you poor guy? In a mocking tone, Jessica snapped at me. That comment finally got to me. No sooner had I opened my mouth to say something back than I heard a clunk and the pull of a chair. Then I will be leaving, a woman stood up and said. So she was the woman the man had been eagerly hitting on while ignoring Jessica. She was a bit mysterious, with a subtle, low tone that suited her well. Would I let you participate out of kindness, and this is the attitude I get? Who do you think you are? Her anger redirected toward her, but Jessica's anger didn't seem to matter to her. I am here by order of you, in other words, my boss. If I am allowed to leave, I would like to do so immediately. Her voice was low and calm. Oh no, Sophie, please don't tell me you're leaving when you rarely even join us for drinks. Jason raised his voice, trying to stop her from leaving. It appeared that he was also interested in her. Jason, it was a brief but very pleasant time for me, but I hope you understand that any more of this time means nothing to me and my service overtime has come to an end. Without a hint of the smile, she addressed Jason and placed a few $100 bills on the table and walked out. It all happened in a flash. Overwhelmed by her demeanor, I just gaped, watching her walk away. What's with that attitude? I'll tell my mom about this when I get home. Jessica grumbled in frustration and downed her glass of wine in one go. It seemed that they had connections beyond just work. Who was that woman? You called her Sophie, right? I quietly asked Jason. Her name was Sophie. It turned out she was actually Jessica's secretary. Jessica was her boss. After that, Jessica's mood quickly improved as she was able to talk leisurely with the man she favored because Sophie was no longer there. The man seemed displeased, but she was oblivious. I finished 2 beers and made up an excuse to leave the matchmaking party early. I had no interest in what happened after I left. The only person I was interested in at the party was Sophie, who had left promptly. We hadn't exchanged a single word, and I didn't know her contact details. Probably I'll never see her again. A week has passed since the matchmaking party. Nothing in my daily life has changed. Jason contacted me to apologize afterwards. It seems that the matchmaking party was arranged at Jessica's request, probably because the man she was interested in was going to be there. He asked me to join again, but I felt like avoiding it for a while. Some things seemed tedious, and most importantly, the work was overwhelming. On the workbench, the smashed clay was still there after a week. I just couldn't bring myself to redo it, so I opened my computer to check my emails. I accepted job requests via email, whether sculpting prototypes or crafting final pieces. I only took on work that I genuinely liked, since I was not affiliated with any company. I believed I was entitled to this bit of self-indulgence. But the job that was stuck in front of me at the time was not one I was willing to accept. It was a job referred to by my mentor, which I couldn't refuse. I thought it was understandable that I didn't feel good about it. The task involved researching to create a statue of a particular individual. That was the job currently causing me distress. Moreover, all they gave me was one photo, and the photo was like a passport photo. It was impossible to grasp his personality from such a photo. A bust might be manageable, but a full-body statue would have been difficult. No choice but to go and see for myself. I muttered to myself, trying to muster some motivation. I threw on a coat over my work clothes and headed out. My destination was a private museum, owned by an entrepreneur who had collected various artworks. The statue of Charles Harrison, the founder of this museum, was my job. To understand his personality, I visited the museum he founded. The museum was located deep within a forest that was artificially constructed. The museum, with its white walls and large windows, was striking. During a weekday afternoon, the place was quiet, with few visitors. The exhibits, divided between paintings and sculptures, were breathtakingly serene and beautiful. His taste in art clearly was refined. I had heard he was a demanding person, but I felt that shouldn't be the sole focus of the statue. It was against my principles to create something that only cut out a part of a multifaceted human being. I wanted to know more desperately. I examined the exhibits, searching for fragments of his essence. Oh my gosh, look who's here. I recognized you right away by your dirty work clothes. A voice from behind startled me, and I turned around. There stood Jessica, arms crossed, dressed in a suit. I didn't know you had a taste for fine art. Excuse me, this is my workplace. She pointed at a security camera that was monitoring the museum. Apparently, she had seen me on the monitor. I really wished she would just leave me alone. So, this is your workplace? Yes, I'm the deputy director here. Would you like a tour? No, thank you. I prefer to look around quietly. I turned my back to her, focusing on the artworks behind me. She clicked her heels in irritation. Jessica, the chief curator Fred is waiting for your approval. That low and calm voice reached my ears. I instinctively turned around. There stood Sophie. She was wearing a long tight skirt suit and a thin silver necklace. Her modest makeup was the same as at the matchmaking party. Alex, I apologize for not properly introducing myself the other day, she said. Sophie, I asked in surprise. Yes, and I'm sorry for the interruption, she continued. But what's this guy to you, Jessica? Suddenly, Jessica started to panic at Sophie's demeanor. Jessica, this is Alex, the sculptor we've commissioned for the museum statue. Sophie spoke calmly yet sternly, reprimanding Jessica with her gaze. Jessica exclaimed in surprise. I felt a bit embarrassed being introduced so formally. In reality, he's not the kind of person who would normally accept such a sudden request from our museum. Please show him the proper respect as a representative of our institution, Sophie continued. Jessica's face visibly turned red. She probably felt humiliated. Oh, thanks, but I'm not that type of person. I couldn't refuse a job from my mentor. I tried to respond cheerfully. However, unable to bear the embarrassment, Jessica glared at Sophie, then turned on her heel and fled from the exhibition room. She's still so childish, it's troubling. Sophie sighed softly as she watched Jessica leave. You mentioned you were her secretary, right? Yes, I work here as a secretary for both the director Miranda and the deputy director Jessica. She then handed me her business card. She began to explain the reason she had commissioned the statue from me. Sophie mentioned that she had been deeply impressed by my solo exhibition. I was captivated by your solo exhibition at the gallery 2 years ago. I really wanted you to create the statue of Charles Harrison, our founder, she said. I was somewhat embarrassed by her passionate words, which were different from those at the matchmaking party. She had heard from my mentor about the progress of the statue and guessed that I would show up at the museum soon. Alex, I anticipated that you would want to learn more about Charles. Her prediction was spot on. I was a little frustrated and embarrassed knowing that she had read my actions. Please, let me introduce you to more about Charles. She smiled warmly at me. Who could resist such a smile? I sincerely responded, I'd appreciate that. Thank you. I had assumed she would guide me inside the museum, but instead, she quickly led me outside. She then took me straight to the museum's backyard. This was his favorite spot, she explained. It was a small space surrounded by quiet groves. Only one modest bench was placed. I became certain that he was a person who loved tranquility in nature, she explained. She told me that he always reads here. People at the top are lonely. He was no exception, she continued. The one who kept him company was... She gently handed me a photograph. At Charles's feet, a large dog lay. This dog had wandered into the forest as a stray. Sophie told me that raising a stray dog born into the wild was more difficult than we could have imagined. Always skittish, the dog could hardly walk straight even on a leash. It was Charles who had gently embraced and comforted the stray's fearful heart. He wasn't just a strict and ruthless businessman. I looked down at the photo again. Both the dog at his feet and Charles himself had calm expressions. This is a very peaceful place. I shared my genuine impression, and she nodded happily. Miranda and Jessica probably want a grand and stern statue of Charles, but I don't think such a statue fits this museum. She reiterated why she had chosen me for this task. I decided to meet Sophie's expectations. As she stared straight at me, I braced myself. Something clicked in my mind. Thank you. I feel like I've had a breakthrough. I needed to get back to my studio before the image in my mind faded. Sensing my urgency, she nodded appreciatively, sending me off. I left in a rush, barely managing a proper goodbye to Sophie, and hurried back to my studio. Since visiting the museum, I've been working nearly non-stop on the sculpture. Strict yet cold, kind yet solitary, Charles was a man of complex character. I focused intently on capturing the true essence of the elusive Charles. Again and again, I layered and smashed the clay, constantly experimenting. The finished miniature sculpture was incredible, even for me. I was sure Sophie would like it. She was the first person I wanted to show it to. I felt a surge of excitement welling up inside me when I notified the museum that the prototype was complete. A clerk told me that Miranda and Jessica wanted to see it. They will be visiting my studio this afternoon. If they were coming, then Sophie, who is their secretary, would probably accompany them. Imagining her delighted face made me excited. This feeling was new to me. It was like waiting for a first love. The afternoon came, and a sleek black car pulled up in front of my studio. Jessica was the first to step out, then a woman who looked much like her followed. It was likely her mother, Miranda. I learned later that Jessica was Charles' granddaughter, and Miranda was the wife of his eldest son. Their significant roles at the museum made sense. Thank you so much for visiting my studio. As I opened the door, Miranda and Jessica, followed by Sophie, who nodded slightly behind them, entered. So, it's finished. Jessica's haughty demeanor was unchanged. Miranda, who seemed just as brazen, unabashedly scrutinized me. I've been looking forward to this. As I led them into the studio, Miranda spoke. Charles was her father-in-law, Miranda said. He was a very strict man. Her tone was somewhat bitter, which took me by surprise. My grandfather was a strict and cold businessman. I've never seen him smile. Jessica seemed to agree with her mother. Apparently, Jessica's father had passed away. Miranda and Jessica continued to speak ill of Charles, their father-in-law, and grandfather respectively. Their attitude made it clear they held no respect for him. They seemed to have completely forgotten that their current lifestyle was thanks to him while they gossiped. Sophie remains silent, lips tightly sealed. At the studio, I unveiled the prototype of the statue by removing the white cloth that had covered it, eager to see their reactions. My heart was beating a bit faster, curious about what they would say. After a brief silence, Jessica spoke up. What the heck is this? This isn't right. I've never seen him look like this. Don't make things up. My sculpture of Charles was sitting comfortably in his chair with a gentle smile on his face. The book he was reading lay face down on his lap, and his dog looked up at Charles with trusting eyes at his feet. Far from the stern and ruthless businessman image, I wanted to see Sophie's reaction turning towards her. I saw that she was quietly shedding tears. Miranda and Jessica, busy arguing loudly, hadn't noticed Sophie crying. Without raising her voice, Sophie simply cried quietly. This is wrong. This isn't my grandfather. This isn't the grandfather I knew. Redo it. Jessica raised her hand, about to smash the clay model. Sophie restrained her hand from behind. Let go of me. Jessica yelled. I know this side of Charles. I can't believe that you guys, who are supposed to be part of the same family, don't know it. Her words made Jessica's cheek flush with anger. Her blood must have rushed to her head in fury. What do you know? A gentle person. That's a joke. Do you have any idea what my mother and I went through? Shaking off the hand that held her, Jessica screamed at Sophie with a demonic expression. That's because you guys were secretly trying to sell off the artworks. Sophie's words made the color drain from Jessica's face. You think me and Grandpa didn't know that? My father, who was the second son, told me that I should take his side, Sophie revealed. She was the daughter of Charles's second son. It appeared that Sophie and Jessica were cousins. Following the death of his eldest son, Charles began showing signs of dementia. It was then that Jessica and Miranda saw their opportunity. Without drawing attention, they schemed to sell the artworks Charles had collected. And indeed, some were sold. My grandfather used to say, "Why were you in such a hurry when they would inherit everything once he was gone?" Sophie continued. He was saddened that you didn't cherish his beloved artwork. It may be a difference in the way we value things, but there are a certain number of people who can only judge artworks by money. I didn't want to blame Jessica and her mother, but I wouldn't want my work judged by such values. Can't you see that the reason you didn't get to touch Grandpa's kind side was because of yourself? Her words caused Jessica to visibly slump. In a small voice, she repeated, "It's not my fault. I'm not to blame. It's because Grandpa favored you. I just wanted to teach him a lesson," she exclaimed. Selling off precious things as a way of taking revenge. Was this Jessica's form of retaliation? It's enough, Jessica, the museum director, her mother, said as she gently embraced Jessica, who was trembling with anger. We would like you to continue with the statue as it is, she said, taking Jessica and leaving the studio. There must have been some conflict between Jessica and Charles. I never imagined it could have twisted this far, Alex said. Thank you. I never imagined Grandfather could be revived in such a wonderful way. Sophie expressed her gratitude. You wanted Jessica to know the side of him, didn't you? I asked, noticing her surprise. Sophie relaxed, chuckled, and whispered, You caught me. Sophie then explained that unlike her, Jessica had been raised strictly as the eldest daughter of a legitimate family. Probably, Jessica had misunderstood Charles's affection. If this statue was placed in front of the museum, Jessica will have to face the gentle Charles every day. I hope that the twisted image of him in her mind will be replaced by this kinder version, Sophie said. She extended her hand for a handshake, and I gladly accepted. I think your cousin will be okay now. But more importantly, why don't we talk about our plans going forward? Sophie looked up, surprised. Her eyes were on me. I could see the reflection of me laughing in her big eyes. Like, how about going out to dinner with me this weekend? Her eyes widened even more. It was as if she was as startled as a deer in headlights. I wished she would say yes right away. I looked into her eyes and prayed in my heart. I was at rock bottom after my wife left me. It was a sweet woman with dimples who rescued me when I was questioning my own purpose in life. At that time, I never imagined our relationship would turn out this way. My name's Logan. After graduating from college, I landed a job in a top-tier company. Typically, after the training period for new employees, they'd be assigned to a branch office near the headquarters. But I was assigned directly to the headquarters. The job was rigorous, only good results were acceptable. It was demanding from the beginning. Determined not to fall behind my seniors, I strived hard and rapidly improved my skills. I graduated from a prestigious university, always loved studying, and aimed for the top. Perhaps it was sheer luck that brought me this far. However, these two qualifications seemed to naturally boost my image. I'm fairly tall, but I'd say I have a pretty average appearance. Fashion isn't exactly my strong suit. Still, thanks to my credentials, I often got approached by women. My 20s went by in a whirlwind, with both work and personal life keeping me on my toes. After working at the company for several years, I, at the age of 30, professionally might not have any official title yet, but I felt I was on the brink of becoming a supervisor. On the personal front, I started dating someone a friend introduced during a night out, and just last year, we tied the knot. We moved into a reasonably spacious and stylish apartment with a great view and were thoroughly enjoying our newly life. With my salary, we were comfortable, and considering our plans to have children, the physical tools and future considerations, my wife chose to be a full-time housewife. Things at work were going smoothly, and every day I would return to a home where my wife was eagerly waiting. Everything seemed to be sailing smoothly, at least up to this point. Then one day, a transfer notice came in. The new location. A rural branch office, quite the contrast from the bustling city I'm accustomed to. The notice did mention supervisor, so it was undeniably a promotion. But having assumed I'd stay at the headquarters, I was visibly shaken. I headed home and broke the news to my wife, but there was no joy in the promotion for me. The first thing out of her mouth was, "Why such a countryside? What's going on?" I was told by HR that they needed my skills at the new location. Even after relaying this to my wife, she seemed far from convinced. Moreover, the new place would require a move. While my wife was struggling to come to terms with it all, we didn't have much time before the move. So we started looking for a new place to live and went for some viewings throughout the day. As we visited multiple places, seeing the town, the buildings, which looked like shabby apartments if we were in the city, her mood progressively soured. On a whim, we drove by the new branch office. The sight of its worn-out walls against the backdrop of a fading town wasn't encouraging. She was speechless. Just seeing this place, she couldn't accept the continuous unsettling events, and our views couldn't align. We ended the day with just the viewings. Once we got home, discussions turned into arguments. Sure, it's labeled as a promotion, but isn't this just a demotion in disguise? If you work there, you'll never get a promotion or raise. We could be living below our means for the rest of our lives, my wife complained in tears. Our discussions reached a deadlock, and before we knew it, a moving day arrived. We decided to keep our electronic appliances in the city apartment for now. I took only my belongings and moved into the new apartment alone for the time being. The plan was for my wife to visit during weekends to see how things played out. However, after several weeks, she still hadn't made peace with the situation, saying, "I can't live here. I can't have the life I want with a husband working in a branch office with a dubious chance at a raise. I don't want it." After being told that by my wife, we ended up divorcing. I guess it's inevitable. Time for a fresh start and to focus on my job. That was my mindset. But the weight of the word divorce hit hard. Often at work, my hands would stop and my thoughts would spiral. I remember how homely my ex-wife was, how she always kept the house clean and had delicious meals waiting for me. Just hearing her cheerful welcome home would wash all the fatigue away. I thought I'd be fine living alone, but with a divorce, it's lonely and tough. Can't live the ideal life in the countryside. What was my worth after all? Sigh. I sighed loudly even though I was at work. Seeing my distress, some colleagues, feeling sorry for me, invited me out for drinks. You're much more approachable than the previous supervisor. You're doing so well for someone so young. You're sharp and precise, just like when you were at the headquarters. Even some older colleagues were present, and they all refrained from bringing up the divorce, instead encouraging and praising me. With that warmth, I was re-energized. Time has a way of healing things. After a while, I became accustomed to my new life and dedicated myself to the responsibilities at hand. Around that time, our branch was scheduled for an occasional inspection. Logan, long time no see. I'll be here for the week, so let's work well together. Hearing that familiar voice and turning around, I was met by Sarah, a former colleague from the headquarters. Though Sarah is younger than me, her fearless determination is well recognized, making her an adept career woman, especially in the field of inspections. She has the demanding task of traveling to branches nationwide, constantly on the move. Still, Sarah never complains and takes on her duties with unwavering stamina. I've always held her in high regard. Sarah, have you been well? I couldn't help but feel a sense of camaraderie. My voice grew louder with happiness. Oh, my apologies. I should address you as Miss Connor here, right? Given our current positions, Sarah now held a higher position than I did. After straightening up, I greeted her again, to which she replied with a playful chuckle, "Don't be so formal." She then nudged me with her elbow, just like she used to. When Sarah laughs, adorable dimples form on her cheeks. When it comes to inspections, everyone tends to get a bit tense. But thanks to Sarah's charming demeanor, the atmosphere always settles into a comfortable state, allowing everyone to work as usual. It's quite remarkable. Then that night, I decided to go out to dinner with Sarah. She was staying at a hotel nearby, and since she was planning on dining out, she asked for restaurant recommendations. Even though it was just the two of us having a meal, our conversation was mostly about work. In such a relaxed setting, we could discuss matters we wouldn't have time for at the office, making the time fly by fruitfully. As our meal and conversation neared its end, I noticed Sarah glancing at her watch. "I'm sorry, we've been here quite a while, haven't we? We should probably head out. Your wife might be getting worried," said Sarah as she began to prepare to leave. Seeing the look on my face, she tilted her head in confusion. Well, the thing is, I then shared with her that I had gotten divorced. I went into the reasons as well, and as I spoke, Sarah listened attentively, nodding from time to time. She then casually remarked, "You know, with your capabilities, I'd expect you to be back at the main office soon." Surprised by her candid statement, I asked, "What do you mean?" Sarah responded, "It's probably a temporary placement. Once you've turned this branch around, I bet they'll want you back at headquarters." Her tone made it sound like a given. I was curious about where she had gotten such information. Sarah chuckled and said, "Don't underestimate a woman's network." I was all yours, completely absorbed in the conversation. The distance from the city hustle, the divorce, and even though my duties might have been lighter than at the headquarters, perhaps my spirits had been down without me realizing. I had perhaps underestimated myself. Seeing this, Sarah laughed and said, "Do you even realize how talented you are? Your skills are well known at the headquarters, and of course, I'm aware too." She ended on her usual cheerful note, "You better keep up the good work," and gave me a pat on the shoulder. The pain throbbed, but it rekindled my spirit completely. I'll return to the main office someday. With that resolve, I worked even harder. Time flew by, and before I knew it, I was 35. "Thank you, sir," one colleague said. "I'll miss you. I hope to be just like you someday." I received a large bouquet and shook hands with everyone in my department. I worked exceptionally hard as a supervisor, leading our team to great success. I also mentored my successor, who then moved up to a managerial position in recognition of my accomplishments. I have now returned to work at the headquarters, even though I was returning to the same department as before. I got promotion. I'd be joining as a department head. The bustling city atmosphere felt familiar, while the air quality was so-so. I've always loved the vibrant energy of the city. I took a few days off to handle my move and settle down before officially starting at the main office. My colleagues at the headquarters, knowing it would be hard to coordinate once I got busy, decided to throw me a welcome back party during this break. They booked the city's finest upscale restaurant for the celebration, combining 2 private rooms just behind the counter seats. Seeing all those familiar faces and sharing the joy of working together again naturally brought smiles and lively conversations. Just as I thought the day would end on a high note, something unexpected happened. When I looked towards the counter to place an additional order, a customer walking in caught my eye. Looking closer, I realized it was my ex-wife, and she wasn't alone. She was with a man. Our eyes met, and she looked as startled as I felt, freezing in place. The man noticed and asked my ex-wife, "Who's that?" Snapping back to reality, she gave her. I smiled and replied with a sigh, "Oh, that's my ex-husband." The man then said, "Oh, that guy," and looked at me with a wry smile. There wasn't much left to say. She seemed to feel the same, promptly turning her back to me, and both of them took seats at the counter. I didn't let it bother me and continued chatting with my colleagues. However, on my way back from the restroom, my ex-wife called out to me. "Why are you here?" she asked with a cold tone in her voice. "I came back," I replied in the same tone. She laughed dismissively and remarked, "After being demoted, you sure had the guts to come back. You probably screwed up again, didn't you?" Giving me a pitiful look, the man sitting beside her seemed to be asking her about me graduating from a prestigious college and then getting demoted makes no sense, he sneered. Irritated by their comments, I said, "Well then, ready to leave." However, my ex-wife quickly pulled the man close to her and gloated, "He's quite impressive, isn't he?" Without me asking, she began to brag about how he works for a top-tier company, how talented he is, and how his future is so much brighter than mine. Every now and then, she'd throw in a resentful comment about me. From time to time, her bitterness towards me mixed in. As for the man, while he said, "Don't talk like that. It's sad for your ex-husband," he didn't seem entirely displeased with her praise. He chuckled condescendingly at me with every nod he gave. I tried to tune them out, looking for the right moment to head back to my seat. Just then, a colleague heading to the restroom stopped in his tracks. "Hey, isn't that you, Jake?" My colleague recognized the man and addressed him. "Oh, it's a pleasure. Quite the coincidence," Jake responded. It seemed they knew each other. They started chatting lightly, but the man kept stealing glances at me. "Wait, do you work with this guy?" Pointing at me, he asked my colleague. I wonder if they seemed close. My colleague looked surprised that the man didn't recognize me. "Hey, you can't talk to him like that. He's our new department head, and so young and impressive. You should greet him. I mean, seriously, this Mr. Stern, is something else. He's the youngest ever in our company's history to be promoted to this position." My colleague gleefully shared this, briefing me on the details about this Jake guy before taking off. Turns out, this man is a sales rep from a major supplier who frequents our department. After hearing about me from my colleague, the man whispered, "Is Logan the one I've heard rumors about?" His face progressively paled. My ex-wife seemed momentarily stunned but soon snapped, "Wait a minute, you mean he's higher up than you?" and confronted the man with a frustrated look. Still pale-faced, the man muttered something about needing to greet me properly, but was taken aback by my ex-wife's rebuke. There's no point in sticking around to watch their spat. I locked eyes with the man, saying, "So you're Jake, right?" "I'll remember that," with a pleasant smile, then made my way back to my seat. Yet, I could still hear voices from behind. Glancing towards the bar seats, my ex-wife and the man seemed to be having an ongoing dispute. When our eyes met, Jake quickly looked away, urging my ex-wife, let's leave now, and quickly settled the bill. With a face portraying sheer frustration, my ex-wife gave me one last glance, then slammed the door on her way out. Soon after, I returned to my dream position at the company's headquarters. From day one, with a hectic schedule, I felt that old buzz, making me even more passionate about my job. Sometime later, I bumped into Jake at work. He immediately approached me, deeply bowing, apologizing for his rudeness that day. I told him I don't mind at all anymore, but given his sincere regret, I offered, "Want to grab some coffee?" I don't mind at all anymore, but given his sincere regret, I offered to grab some coffee. After a couple of sips, he let out a long sigh, finally appearing relaxed. We made small talk about work, but the conversation naturally shifted to my ex-wife. Apparently, they had a falling out. Whether it was her pride or something else, she ended up breaking things off with Jake. I couldn't help but be slightly baffled. Was she so set on snagging a well-educated, hiring man? I feel sorry for my ex-wife too, even though she is beautiful to look at, cheerful and friendly, and has many good qualities. Though Jake came off as a jerk that day, I've heard from others that he's genuinely talented. I cheered him on, telling him to keep his head high. After work, as I stepped out of the office, my phone rang. The screen read Sarah. Before I could finish saying hello on the phone, Sarah Lai started talking. "Hey, it's me. I'm coming back this Sunday." Her voice was as bubbly as ever. Since that inspection, Sarah and I had kept in touch. At first, our conversations were mostly about work. Sarah would often give me a piece of her mind, always offering emotional support. I think the reason I never gave up and aimed higher was probably because of her presence. "I know you better than anyone else. Has some confidence and just do it." That's how she sounds on the phone. Even though she's supposed to be younger than me, it makes me laugh, wondering who's really the older one. Then, on Sunday, I waited for Sarah at the GFK airport lobby. When Sarah saw me, her face lit up with a broad smile, and she hurried over. "I'm back," she said cheerfully, and Sarah hugged me. Being embraced in such a public place, I was taken aback and embarrassingly stuttered, "Welcome back." I tentatively put my arm around Sarah's back, not sure how to react in the situation. Then Sarah looked up at me with an expectant expression and said, "Don't you have something else to say?" I could feel everyone's eyes on us. It was hard to admit, but I looked at her and said, "I love you, Sarah." But she teased, "Is that all? Isn't there more?" making a mischievous face, urging me to say more. I felt like my face was on fire, but I knew I had to say it now. So I gathered my courage and proposed to Sarah right there. As Sarah and I communicated frequently, we became closer. We both knew our feelings for each other were growing. But with Sarah traveling to various branches nationwide and having long overseas business trips, we hardly got a chance to meet. During this time, I once confessed my feelings over the phone, but she told me she wanted to hear it in person. And in time, we officially got married and became husband and wife. "Hey, look, I found this adorable mug and just had to buy it," Sarah said, seeming to have sneakily hidden it among the moving boxes, intending to use it from today. She happily lays the two out side by side and smiles. The new apartment we got for our life together with Sarah. From our high-rise view, I feel even more motivated. She wanted to settle down and had expressed her wish to retire early from her job, but they didn't want to let go of such a valuable employee. After taking the short break, she decided to work part-time at the headquarters. As for me, my role as a department head keeps me extremely busy. It helps that Sarah understands my job. She's good at supporting me and has been a tremendous help. "Come on, put your back into it and have a great day every day." Sarah playfully smacks my back as I head out. I think she treats me a little rough, but when she does this, the day goes strangely well. "I'll be off now. Take care, Sarah," I tell her. And as I leave, I can't help but notice how her dimples make her smile even more endearing. Today, I have to keep working hard to ensure that smile never fades. I can't always rely on her support. This new chapter of our life is bound to be busy, but I remind myself never to take my wife for granted.